Good morning, everyone, if it's morning for you, or good evening. Welcome to the MPAID information session on academics today. This is Carol Finney. I'm the MPAID program director. We'll be joined later in the session by faculty chair Danny Roderick. Also with me today are Sarah Olia, the MPAID assistant director, and Kevin Drum, who is our program assistant and tech wizard. So today we are doing part one of a three-part series. Today's session is training for development, a focus on academics and faculty. Next Friday in this same time slot, we will have a session on careers and alumni. And 2 weeks from today, we will do a session on admissions procedures and student life at the Kennedy School. The following Friday, we'll do a live question and answer session. Okay, first off, the Harvard Kennedy School is part of Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and that includes Harvard College. The Harvard Kennedy School has its own separate campus, and a few years ago, we added some new buildings which have resulted in 6 new classrooms, a new dining facility, offices, and meeting spaces, and a new student lounge and study space, as well as a redesigned central courtyard. In normal year, this is a sort of a popular student study space on campus. This year, we are back on campus after a largely remote year last year, but with masks and caution. So we'll start with an overview of the Kennedy School and our master's programs, and then discuss the MPAID program in more detail. Here at the Kennedy School, we have 4 master's degree programs and 4 doctoral programs. We usually have about 1,000 full-time students on campus, about half of whom are international. More detailed information about all of our programs may be found on our website, but to give you a brief overview, the mid-career program shown on the top line is a flexible 1-year program. The typical student has about 14 years of professional experience. So those of you listening who have more than 7 years of experience may want to consider that option. On the next line, the MPAID program enrolls about 70 students a year who have about 4 to 5 years of professional work experience on average when they enter. Roughly 75% are citizens of developing or transitional economy countries, and 10 to 15% are US citizens. In the first year, MPAID students take a set of development-focused core courses. In the second year, they choose electives to suit their interests. On the third line, the MPP program has a structure similar to the MPAID, with core courses in the first year, followed by electives in the second year. However, the MPP program is much larger, enrolling about 225 students a year, about 75 or 80% of whom are Americans. There are no prerequisite courses in the MPP, and students choose among a number of different concentrations. Finally, on the bottom line, the 2-year MPA program is a flexible program for applicants who have at least 3 years of work experience and substantial previous graduate coursework. That would approximate what we would have in the core course sequence usually. I encourage you to spend some time looking into which program is the right fit for you, as you can only apply to one program in any given year and cannot transfer from one program to another once you're here. We'll give you a minute to read through the screen a little bit. Okay. The MPAID program. The 2-year MPAID program is designed to prepare the next generation of leaders in international development. It's an economics-centered, multidisciplinary program providing rigorous training in analytical and quantitative methods with a focus on policy and practice rather than on training future academics. The MPAID program was designed to combine the rigor of a PhD program in economics with a multidisciplinary approach and an emphasis on policy applications to development over pure theory. Because it is an economics-centered program, we have prerequisite course requirements, including 1 college-level course in each micro and macroeconomics, and multivariable calculus, which is typically the 3rd course in a university calculus sequence. All of these must be completed before entering the program. There are 4 things that we think distinguish this program, and we'll cover all of them during this 3-part series. The MPID program is known for its challenging integrated curriculum, outstanding faculty, bright, committed students, and successful alumni. First, the curriculum. About 20 years ago, when the faculty designed the MPID program, they set out to provide training that was economics, but grounded in the realities of development and tailored for practitioners. And that's what we do. The MPID program was designed to combine the rigor of a PhD program in economics with a multidisciplinary approach. As Danny Roderick notes above, the COVID-19 pandemic has made painfully clear that to address the global development challenges of our time, you need not only technical knowledge in economics and quantitative methods, but also management, institutional, and political analysis, and those are the core elements of the MPID curriculum. Okay. The MPID curriculum contains core courses specially designed for this program to introduce students to the main economic, quantitative, political, and managerial tools needed by practitioners and leaders in the field of international development. The first year core is followed by a summer internship with electives and a capstone project in the second year called the Second Year Policy Analysis Program. Our core curriculum begins with 2 semester sequences in micro and macroeconomics, as well as quantitative methods, which consists of statistics and econometrics. Professor Dan Levy teaches the fall statistics course. Additional first-year courses, Dev 101 and 102, look at the theories of economic development and consider empirical evidence as the basis for designing development policy. These courses identify key features of the development process across countries and develop an analytical framework grounded in economic theory to better understand these patterns. They then apply the frameworks combined with rigorous empirical evidence for smart policy design to enable economic growth and development. In addition to the quantitative courses, the program includes core courses in politics and political philosophy and development, and public sector management in developing countries. The management course is taught by Professor Matt Andrews, who is originally from South Africa. His course contains an approach called problem-driven iterative development. So you work on a complex problem by trying some things, learn as you go, try some more things. So it's iterative and based on what you are learning as you go. The final course in the first year core is called Cases and Applications in International Development. It has 2 parts, cases and applications, which I'll explain in a minute. The purpose of the course is to link theory with practice by applying the range of concepts and techniques learned in the other MPID core courses to selected topics such as education, health, economic growth, the management of financial crises, managing common property resources, international migration, and community development. Practitioners who have worked on these topics in the professional world join us to share their experiences with the class. Since all MPID students take the same set of core courses, the faculty can build upon the core in a coordinated fashion. So they typically will have a case dealing with a topic, followed by an application and a speaker who has worked on this issue in the real world. For example, when the natural resource curse has been discussed in the macro course, the cases and applications course might include a case on oil in Kazakhstan, followed by a guest speaker who has dealt with natural resource challenges in his or her professional life. In that vein, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala spoke to the class about her experience as Minister of Finance in oil-dependent Nigeria. In another example, following the micro classes on the tragedy of the commons, the focus might be on climate change as an example. Previously, we had 2 speakers on this topic, Andrew Steer, a former World Bank economist who's now heading the World Resources Institute, who spoke about collective action. He was followed by physicist David Keith, who favors a more immediate geoengineering effort to moderate the Earth's temperature by sending reflective particles into the upper atmosphere. There's no single viewpoint on this or other issues, so students have the opportunity to weigh various viewpoints and form their own opinions. In the summer between the 2 years of study, MPID students complete a required summer internship which is an opportunity to apply the skills gained in the first year in a real world context. Since all of our students come to the program with considerable work experience in at least one kind of organization, the summer is an opportunity to explore a new area in terms of geography, in terms of topic, or in terms of organizational type. We encourage students to try something different from what they've done before, usually in a developing country other than their own. The summers of 2020 and 21, due to COVID, most of the internships were conducted remotely. We certainly hope that our internships will be able to be back on site by the time you would be an intern in the summer of 2023. As an example of a pre-COVID internship, these students worked with the Rwanda Development Board assessing the potential for the cut flower sector. In another pre-COVID example, Ratnika Prasad interned at the World Bank's Climate Change Group in Washington, D.C. She emailed us soon into her internship saying, "I'm 2 weeks into my internship with the World Bank's Climate Change Group, and it's been an incredible experience seeing how a year of MPAID has prepared me for this work." She is now graduated, of course, and she is the Associate Director of the Market Lab at the Nature Conservancy. The curriculum does include room for electives in the second year. Students may take up to 6 elective courses. The students may choose substantive courses in broad areas such as national and international economic policy, or in sectors such as sustainable development, social policy, or global governance, or in private sector development and its regulation. Other popular electives are skill building courses, including development policy strategy, taught by Ricardo Hausman, negotiations, leadership, finance, and increasingly courses such as data science and data visualization. There's a huge range of courses to choose from at the Kennedy School and beyond. Students may cross-register to the other professional schools at Harvard, such as the schools of business, law, public health, education, and design, or the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, which includes the departments of economics, government, computer science, math, and so on. We also have cross-registration relationships with MIT and with the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. The last part of the curriculum is the second year policy analysis, which goes by the acronym SIPA. The SIPA is a capstone paper designed to integrate coursework through the application of your analytical tools to a policy program that is chosen by the student. Michael Walton, shown here, is one of the faculty members who advises students on their SIPAs. After a full career with the World Bank, Michael joined the Kennedy School faculty to bring his practitioner's perspective to students' capstone projects. Students choose a real-world policy problem of interest to them, diagnosing the situation and proposing solutions. Here is one award-winning example. The authors of this paper, Luciana de la Flor and Damian Galinsky, are from Peru and Argentina, respectively. Their paper was called Scaling Farms to the Frontier, the Case of Non-Traditional Agricultural Exports in Peru. And they investigated ways to scale up the sale and export of products that have not typically been Peru's exports. In another example, Yi Yang's topic was the role of government in promoting foreign direct investment spillover in Mozambique. Okay. The Kennedy School does offer combined degree programs with some other professional schools. We have joint degree programs with Harvard Business School and Harvard Law School, and concurrent degrees with several other business schools, Wharton, Dartmouth, Stanford, and the Sloan School at MIT, and various law schools listed here. We also have concurrent degrees with Harvard Divinity School, the Harvard Design School, and with medical schools on a case-by-case basis. The application process for each school is completely separate. If you are interested in the program with Harvard Business School, note that you must apply to both schools, the Kennedy School and the Harvard Business School, at the same time, that is, in the same admissions year. More information is available on our website. The advantage of doing a combined degree is that you can complete 2 degrees in one less year than it would ordinarily take. For example, an MBA plus an MPAID can be completed in 3 years rather than 4. A student in a combined degree program spends 1 year at each school and splits the 3rd year between the 2 schools, with fall at the Kennedy School and spring at the other school. This usual study plan is to begin at the Kennedy School, then spend the second year at the other school, and split the third year as shown. The Harvard Kennedy School is home to a large and distinguished faculty working in international development. In addition to research and teaching, our faculty is actively engaged in the affairs of the world, shaping public policy, advising governments, and helping to run major institutions in the United States and abroad. The learning in our classrooms reflects this reality. Our faculty are both academics and practitioners. Some, like Jeffrey Frankel, have been primarily academics, although he spends considerable time advising governments on macroeconomic policy. Jeff has taught the core macro course for MPAID students for many, many years. Assistant Professor Ji Bai has also been primarily an academic. She works on microeconomic issues of firms in developing countries and emerging markets and teaches the core course on game theory. Other members of our faculty have spent years as practitioners. Professor of Practice Ricardo Hausman served as Finance Minister of Venezuela in the 1990s and Director of the Research Department of the Inter-American Development Bank before joining the Kennedy School as Professor of the Practice of Economic Development. He served for many years as the Director of Harvard Center for International Development, and he teaches the popular elective development policy strategy. Professor Carmen Reinhardt, an expert on financial crises, is currently on leave serving as the World Bank's chief economist. When at the Kennedy School, she teaches an elective course on financial crises and advises on second-year policy analyses. Like our student body, our faculty is international. Faculty members teaching in the MPAID program come from Argentina, China, Cuba, India, Pakistan, Peru, South Africa, Turkey, the UK, Venezuela, and of course the United States. They bring their varied perspectives to their teaching. Thank you for your attention. I want to just remind you that there will be 2 other sessions coming up next week on careers and alumni, and 2 weeks from today on admissions and student life. At this point, I would like to take any questions that you have for me, and in a few minutes we'll be joined by Professor Danny Roderick. Sarah, do you want to?
Sure. I've been answering a lot of questions that have come in through the Q&A, and I'll just say that many of the questions you're asking right now are excellent questions that have to do with the admissions process and our prerequisite requirements. In our 3rd session that will take place on October 22nd, I will be giving a presentation that will go over many of these things in great detail. So I do hope that you will be able to tune in for that one, but I have been sending you some quick answers here in the chat. One thing that has come up a few times, Carol, I know that you touched on, but maybe you could speak a little bit more about, is the importance of work experience to applying to the MPAID program and the likelihood of anyone being admitted directly out of college, and then how we view different types of work experience that people have when we're assessing applications.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. We do not directly admit people from their undergraduate experience. And the reason for that is that we have found over time that is much, much more beneficial to both the student and to the collective student body if students come in with at least 2, but typically 4 or 5 years of work experience, broadly defined. So the reasons for that are for you as an applicant. You want to be sure before you invest 2 years of your time and considerable money in getting a graduate degree, you want to make sure that it's in a field you're interested in working in. So if you have worked in the field or something related to the development field, you'll have a much better idea whether this is really something that you want to do. The second thing, to your benefit of having work experience, is that when frameworks for analyzing development issues come up in class, it's really helpful to have in the back of your mind situations where you found yourself in during your work experience, and you could say, okay, how would this have helped me think about the problem I was trying to solve 2 years ago or last year? So it's beneficial to you in those ways. It's beneficial to the program and the student group as a whole because you are sitting in class with people who have worked at education NGOs, at central banks, in various government ministries, in consulting, where they were consulting to development organizations, to private students who've been working in private financial situations. And there's a huge exchange of information and learning between students. And so we have found over time that it's much better to have people who have a lot to contribute in that vein as well. So if you are in your undergraduate studies right now, I strongly recommend that you work for at least 2, preferably 4 or 5 years before considering applying to the MPID program. Sarah, were there other variations of this? Oh, about the type of work experience. We take development related work experience pretty broadly. So as I mentioned in my examples, we do have people who come from Wall Street, often saying, I worked in investment banking for 2 or 3 years and realized I don't want to do that for the rest of my life, but that experience is useful. And we also have people who come from consulting. Many people come to us from McKinsey, Bain, BCG, and so on. So the one thing I would say that for applicants who are US citizens and have lived in the US all their lives, we really look for experience outside the US in a developing or transitional economy country. For those of you who are coming from those countries, your life, of course, has probably been primarily spent in your home country there. So any other questions?
Another question, Carol, that you might address is to elaborate on the differences between the MPAID and the MPP program for people who are considering both and trying to decide which one might be a better fit.
Okay. Yes, the MPP program is a much larger program, has more students, and it also has a number of different concentrations in them, which I probably can't think of all of them, but business and government, international relations type of focus, urban policy and planning, various concentrations within the program because it's a larger program. And most of the students in the MPP program are US citizens. The MPP program does take a certain number of students every year directly from undergraduate, so they are putting less emphasis on the work experience. And in terms of the curriculum, because most of the students are Americans, many of the examples and the cases that you would look at would have a US focus. So for example, if you are looking at a case in traffic management, you might be looking at New York City or LA. And if you are from another country, you would just be making the translation to the traffic in the capital city of your own country, for example. So it does have a more US focus, and it is not solely on international development. Those would be 2 of the main differences.
And then maybe that same question for the MPA program, and then the differences between the MPAID and doing a PhD. Okay.
The MPID and the 2-year MPA. The 2-year MPA has no required courses. It's a self-designed program for people that have at least 3 years work experience and have done some previous graduate coursework. So it might be someone who has an MBA or has a master's in econ or similar, and wants to self-design a course of study that would complement their previous education and work experience. So it's philosophically the opposite. In the MPID program, we have a set of core courses that our faculty think equip you with the tools you need to be a successful development practitioner. The MPA2 program has the philosophical approach that you, the student, are better equipped to design a course of study for yourself based on what you already know and what you want to fill in. Then touch briefly on the MPAID versus PhD topic, and I think that will be one that Danny Roderick can address when he's just joined us. Okay, good. If your next job is you want to be assistant professor of such and such at a university, you should go to a PhD program. Go directly to a PhD in economics or political science or whatever your preferred topic is. And that would be your shortest and most direct route to that type of an academic job. If you, on the other hand, want to be a practitioner in international development, a PhD is not your most direct route. You can spend a lot of time writing a dissertation that probably will not have any direct effect on anything that you do as a practitioner. That's one of the reasons that the MPID program was developed, was to fill in that gap of people who wanted to have economic training of a PhD, but didn't want to spend the time writing a dissertation. Okay, I think I will pause there and turn over to Danny Roderick, who can give you the big picture about the purpose of the MPID, and then take some questions.
Thank you, Carol. I hope you can hear me. Welcome to this session, and thanks for your interest in the MPAID program, wherever you are. It's the MPAID program is a relatively recent master's program in the Kennedy School. It's sort of a little bit over, I think, 22 or 23 years ago. A bunch of us faculty members sat around and tried to figure out what a master's program devoted specifically to development policy would look like. And we devised a program that tries to train leaders in development. And I think with some pride, I can say that we have been moderately successful in that if we just look at our graduates and the positions that they occupy now. But let me back up here for a second and talk a little bit about the bigger context, the world of development. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Depending on where you are, you might be experiencing this more severe or somewhat less severe kind of level, but nowhere in the world have we really overcome the pandemic yet. And that has significant implications for development as well. In fact, the pandemic looks like it's going to be a significant turning point for the progress that we have made in the last 3 or 4 decades in poverty reduction and economic performance and development more broadly in terms of social and political achievement around the world. For the 3 or 4 decades before the pandemic, for most parts of the world, things were actually looking up. Even in sub-Saharan Africa, there was a period of growth. Poverty in many places was coming down in terms of rates of absolute poverty and deprivation. And of course, East Asia, Southeast Asia, led by China, and then South Asia, India and Bangladesh had made actually a lot of progress in development. Now it looks like for the next few years, many of these things are going to be reversed. Actually, poverty is back on the rise, and overall economic growth and the progress of development it looks like it's going to be significantly slowed down in the next few years, so that this process of economic convergence that we were experiencing prior to the pandemic is very much in question in the next few years. So the kind of issues that we cover in the MPAID, the tools that we provide, I think, are fundamental in thinking about the choices that both governments, NGOs, other actors in the field of development, international agencies, donors face. From the very beginning of the program, our philosophy in this program that we were not going to be teaching you what to think, but how to think. That is to say, we are not a faddish program. We don't teach the views that are the favorite views on development that happens to be current. So some of you might think that the key to economic development is access to finance. Some of you might teach that it's access to new technologies. Some of you might think it's really education, investments in health and education. Some of you might think it's really about getting the macroeconomic policies right and monetary and fiscal stability. What we teach in the program is in an integrated way is really how to think about which one of these constraints bind, how economies and societies and polities operate, and how those constraints might be overcome in a very kind of a context-specific way. We teach, in other words, in a very kind of a diagnostic way of thinking about development, rather than saying, here are the 25 things that every country needs to do. We try to teach you the tools of thinking about what are the priorities, what is a sensible agenda that takes care, that is cognizant of not just the technocratic issues, but is also cognizant about the stakeholders, about different interests, about how to get things done, the management aspects of economic development. So when we sat around to design this program, we wanted to really have a comprehensive program for development policy, which meant that we have, as those of you who've already looked at the design of our core curriculum, we have a very extensive core curriculum. What that means is that there are a lot of courses that you have to take. You cannot place out of. In fact, the entire first year is made up of core courses, and the core extends into the second year as well. That's because we had set very, very high standards. We wanted to have everybody who comes through this program have the right economic and quantitative tools, so that we have extensive training in economics and statistical and quantitative methods. We don't want anybody who comes out of this program to ever have to say, I'm not an economist, but, well, you will know as much as any economist knows on this and a lot more. And the lot more part of this is that we provide extensive training in the core in governance, in political institutions, political theory. We provide extensive training in management. We provide integrative coursework that connects different parts of the curriculum, the technocratic, the analytic, the managerial, the institutional, and governance analysis through case workshop, and a second year policy analysis, which is also a year-long integrative exercise that students have to do. I think this is a program that has worked well. It's got a very dedicated faculty that have invested a lot in designing the curriculum and who teach in it. We have excellent staff. Carol Finney is the director of the program, and she and her staff are extremely useful and helpful for students. Any current student or alumni of the program will tell you what that actually means and how true that is. But last and least, really, we have actually a tremendous group of students in the program, and that's really our luck as the institution and the faculty, that we've been able to attract an incredibly talented, experienced, and increasingly diverse group of students from all around the world. And we try hard to ensure that we have a truly diverse and international group of students. In fact, the vast majority of the students in our program are from developing countries. We've had increasing success in attracting students from sub-Saharan Africa. As I'm sure Carol has told you, we look for a number of things. We look, of course, fundamentally interest in making a difference in the world of development. We look for work experience, really 2 years minimum work experience in a field of development is really our field, very closely related to development is a requirement. We look for somebody who is for students who are willing to, who have a taste for and willing to invest in acquiring the quantitative and analytical tools that the program offers. And we look for diverse interests. I mean, I think one of the great strengths of our program really is that our students come not just from different parts of the world, have different life experiences, but they come from different segments of the world of development. You know, some have worked in governments, in central banks or ministries of finance. Some have worked in NGOs and civil society organizations, doing projects on the ground. Some come from international organizations. Some have worked as research assistants doing work on development in various academic institutions or think tanks. Many come from the private sector, doing work that's sort of related to development. And similarly, our graduates pursue very, very diverse professional tracks as well. And that's exactly what we hoped it would happen, because I think there are many different ways in which you can contribute to development, to be really a development practitioner in the broad sense, or a development leader in the broad sense of the word. You can do it within national governments, we can do it within subnational governments, you can do it with NGOs, you can do it with multilateral organizations and donor organizations, or you can do it in think tanks, and you can do it in sort of working in the world of international finance or emerging market finance, or consulting in the world of development. And we have a mix of students that come in with these kinds of backgrounds and then pursue careers in such. And I should not, of course, forget that political careers, a number of our graduates have gone on and have had careers in parliaments, as ministers, and so that's obviously another aspect. So let me not go on much more. So if I try to give you a broad picture of sort of how this program came about, what our philosophy is, and how we approach the training and the strengths of the program. So I'm happy to take some questions from you. So how do we do this?
I can feed you some questions, Danny. I've been monitoring the Q&A here. Yep. Sure. So one person asked, I'm going to rephrase this a little bit, but how do you think what is being taught in the MPAID program now in terms of economic development especially applies to areas that have been heavily disturbed by COVID?
Well, I mean, I think you will see, I mean, if you were here, you would see that what's going on in the pandemic has affected a lot of what we teach in the program. I mean, I think the issues that we teach about institutions, about sort of how economic development happens, access to education, access to health, those are fundamental to thinking about questions about COVID. The diagnostic approach that we take, is fundamental to thinking about how you would prioritize responses to COVID, whether it's in terms of transfers or whether in terms of shoring up the robustness of your health systems or in terms of access to vaccines. So these issues all come into the core courses that we teach, because the core program has been designed not around specific policy issues per se, but around tools. We keep changing the kind of examples, illustrations, or more extensive cases that we do around that applies those tools. So obviously we've been doing a lot more applications to issues of public health, global health, and the questions of the pandemic.
Another question is, from your perspective, what course in the MPAID program makes your students grow the most and prepares them the most for becoming a practitioner?
Well, I don't think there is a single course. I think that I think different students will find different course more helpful. I think those students who come with very strong economics backgrounds might find a course in political institutions or the course in political theory most insightful. Those who come from relatively weaker economics backgrounds might find the course that I teach on development economics and policy to be the one that takes their thinking go the most. Others might find that it's the case workshop that actually just puts everything together. Or it might be the second year paper. That is where you're actually, sort of analyzing in depth some particular issue that you might have worked on before in the summer. And that sort of gives you an opportunity to pull together the tools and deep substantive knowledge in a particular context where you're also integrating issues of economic, political, and management. That might be the one that's really, is putting things together for you. So I don't think there is a single course in the core. At least I couldn't say that as the faculty chair of the program. And then it would be, I think I value all the courses that we offer in this program equally.
Danny, your course that you teach in the fall, I can mention, because I'm not the faculty chair, Dev 101 that you teach in the fall is one that many students find very, very useful, because it's a course that they have not had anywhere else. As you say, the value added for different courses depends on people's background, but there are people who've had, a good course in micro or macro before. But your course, Dev 101, I think is one that people particularly do find interesting. You might want to say a couple sentences about how that course works.
I think what's true about all our courses is that even if the title sounds like something you've done before, that we actually teach it quite differently in a way that's very specific to our program, as well as in a way that sort of integrates and relates to other core courses in the program. So I'll come to my course, but even the microeconomic theory sequence or the macroeconomic theory sequence, the titles might sound very similar to what you might have done before. And in fact, you will need to have done some of it before. But the way we teach it is very different in a couple of respects. First, we teach it from the perspective of economic development and developing societies. So the particular applications of the tools will be all to developing countries. And second, even though we teach at a high level, as Carol was discussing before I started, we are not a PhD program, so we're not interested in teaching the theory for its own sake. So it's taught in a very kind of applied and intuitive kind of a way, which I would guess that for many students who've done economic theory, even at a high level, they would actually learn the material in a deeper way after having gone through our course. And in terms of my course, the development economics course is, I think what we try to do is combine. I think it's different from most development economics courses in a couple of respects. One is that we actually integrate the micro and the macro. So most development economics courses these days, for example, might focus much more on social programs, microeconomic development, poverty reduction, and RCTs. We integrate that perspective with a much more economy-wide macroeconomic perspective. So we say that sometimes the problems might lie very close to the poor, and that's why you might need to have programs that are education programs or cash grant programs that treat poverty directly. At other times, the problems of underdevelopment or poverty may lie actually at some distance from the poor. It might be the absence of urban employment opportunities, the absence of industrialization opportunities, or problems with the institutional system at the level of the economy as a whole. That's really what's constraining economies from developing, and that might require a more macro perspective. And we provide, and that's the second way in which the course is different, is we provide way of thinking about these problems in a diagnostic kind of a way, sort of thinking through in a local context, in a specific context, where the fundamental issues are, and therefore where the priorities of policymakers or actors in this field might need to tackle.
Another question is, does the MPAID program lean towards a specific economic theory in terms of interventions in developing countries? Is it more orthodox, or does it teach more critical theories as well?
Well, I mean, anybody, who knows me and the work that I do knows that, a lot of my work is considered unorthodox. but I use generally the mainstream or orthodox tools. And I think what we're going to be teaching for the most part are the mainstream tools of economics. And but every instructor has his or her own way of teaching. So we don't define ourselves in as a particular school of thought. In fact, as I was saying before, we don't take a stand on what is the right way to do development. We try to equip students with, different and yes, critical ways of thinking. Now, we want you to be skeptical about received wisdom. One of the things that I say to entering students, we want you to be skeptics, but not cynics. That is to say, we want you not to lose your faith that good things are possible and that learning is possible and that knowledge can be accumulated. But be skeptical about what the received wisdom is, and therefore always ask questions, scrutinize blueprints and best practices and what you're told. So in that sense, I think we're open to a whole variety of approaches, but fundamentally what we teach are the established mainstream ways of analysis.
We have several questions about the application process, which, as I mentioned, we'll talk about in more detail on October 22nd. But since Danny's here with us today, some people are curious to know, for the particular essay on the application where we ask about your commitment to international development, when you're reading those essays, is there anything in particular that you look for? So to help people think about how to approach writing this essay?
I think one of the things that we're really looking for in that essay is a familiarity and a respect for the institutional conditions of developing countries. That you understand at some level that the context and institutions matter, and that they might be different, and that one has to respect those differences and understand how to operate within those differences. So that's one of the things that we look for in that essay. And the other thing, quite broadly, is really is the quality of mind. That is, how do you think about these things? Are you able to get out of the box? Have you learned from your experience? Are you able to think about your experience in a kind of an analytical way and draw some of the implications from that?
Another question is about what opportunities MPAID students have to develop quantitative and qualitative research skills.
Well, I mean, there is, as Carol was saying before, and I will repeat, the MPAID is not a route to a research career. That is to say that we are not a stepping stone to a PhD program. We're not a master's you get before you would go to a PhD program. If you're interested in a research career, there's a much more direct way of going there, which is to either apply to a PhD program or to apply, if you're interested in economics PhD program, apply to a master's in economics and then go on to a PhD program. We are a professional school, and the MPAID program is a professional degree program, which is to say that we prepare students to be practitioners, to be leaders in the field and in organizations, and doers. And in that sense, that while there are opportunities for doing research at the Kennedy School, many of our students will work as research assistants. Certainly the second year policy analysis paper will require you to do applied research, but research targeted to a policy problem. And in that sense, I think the opportunities at the Kennedy School are limitless, because there's a very strong faculty And because the MPAID program is very much grounded in the fundamental disciplines of social science and management and political science and political theory, that the social scientific grounding of the program is extremely strong. You are acquiring those tools that you can do research with, but always with a direction towards answering questions. So if I were to put it this way, I mean, often with the second year paper, for example, students will come to me and say, well, I'm interested in this question, but I don't have the data. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get the data. And my answer is always, well, if you're a policymaker or an actor, the question is not whether you have the data. The question is whether this is an interesting policy relevant question on which a decision needs to be made. If that is so, then you need to do with whatever you have, and that should not dissuade you from writing a second year paper in this topic. Maybe you'll get the data, maybe you don't, but the decision maker has to make that decision with whatever information, qualitative or quantitative, systematic or less systematic, that the decision maker has. Research is different. You would never do a research if you don't have the data, because data, so you in research you move from sort of a data, then you ask, what can I do with this data? What kind of a question can I put on it? In our degree program, in the real world, in the professional world, you first ask the question and then say, okay, what information can I bring in, including qualitative or quantitative data, to answer this? It's two very different styles of thinking.
I'm not sure if you can answer this question, but somebody is asking for the difference between the MPAID and MIT's master's program on data economics and development policy. Are you familiar with that enough to answer that?
Which master's program?
The data economics and development policy program.
MIT's micro.
The MicroMasters. Yeah.
The MicroMasters, yeah. So I mean, we are much broader in terms of our approach, which is that the MIT program, as far as I know, focuses extensively on randomized controlled trials and the microeconomic aspects of development, and it's focused on data analysis and economics. Because we have much more extensive, we are a 2-year program. I don't believe they're a 2-year program. I might be wrong. We have, on top of the focus on the microeconomics of development, we cover the macroeconomics of development, and then we cover, as I said, issues of governance, management, political theory, political institutions, and have a variety of integrative case workshops and the second year paper. So we are a more comprehensive program, I would say.
I think that is about it for questions for you. Thank you for taking the time to answer those. There are several other questions that we didn't address. Some of them were more individualized in nature or didn't apply to the content specifically of this presentation. So we do encourage you to attend the remaining sessions that we have. And then the final session that we're doing is a general Q&A. So that would be a good time to bring any other questions that you think we didn't adequately address. But you can also always email our office with any questions that you have, and I can put that email address in the chat, or maybe Kevin has it on a slide here. And we'd be happy to answer your questions if you don't want to wait for the upcoming sessions that we have. I don't know, Carol, do you have any final words?
Just echoing what you said, Sarah, that we do have next Friday in this same time slot is a session on MPAID alumni and careers. So some of you asked questions that we didn't get time to address today about examples of students who came in as at the mid-career level into MPAID, and also about the way that people advance through international organizations, say at the World Bank or at the IMF with an MPP or an MPAID degree versus a PhD. And we can go into that in more detail at that point. So that's next Friday. And 2 weeks from today, we will talk about admissions detail questions and then have a session on student life with some current students. So by that time, if you are interested in MPID, you probably will have taken a good look at the application and be working your way through that. We also have some questions that have come up about financial aid. And so I would just say briefly that we don't have any part-time options, and we do not recommend for students to work in their first year due to the intensity of the coursework. But there are scholarships available for various geographic or other kinds of situations. We encourage people to look early at options like funding from your government or your employer, or from regional specific scholarship organizations that you may be aware of. And we will talk a little bit more about that during the financial aid session. We also do have a relationship with the Joint Japan World Bank Scholarship Program, such that if you are on there, if you are from a country on their list of eligible countries, that's a very good option. So those are just a little bit about the financial options that we didn't have time to go into. So I encourage you to tune back in next Friday and then 2 weeks from today to view our other sessions. All of them will eventually be posted as recordings on our website. It takes a couple of days. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next week.